Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it may be that you're watching this. I'd like to welcome you back into the studio today. So today we're going to continue the underpainting, or the stage I like to refer to as the poster image, which means we're going to be focusing primarily on just light and dark and a little bit of the dark light halftone. So I read in some of the comments that I have made some of the fingers too thick in the transfer image and the metacarpals too short, and thank you all so much for your observations. That's going to help me quite a bit, since we're going to be continuing the poster image by basically putting the same value scheme on the portrait onto the hand. So today we will be making those corrections and at the same time getting the hand ready for the next stage of the underpainting. So I'm reading in the comments that the left hand should be slimmed finger by finger and extended a little bit, and that the same should apply to the right hand. So basically I must have scrunched the hand a little bit. Thank you all so much for your comments and pointing these things out. Of course, I'm inviting you into my studio each single day. I really want to make you part of this process, and I really want you to have access to the studio every single day of the week. So all of your comments and all of your suggestions is going to be really helpful to me. So for our palette setup today, we have actually, you know, the plastic cover that comes on DVDs, on old DVDs. So what I did was, here's an example of it. So what I did was I cut up the plastic part that you find on old DVDs, and I spray painted the back of it. And then I just used some painter's tape to just apply it onto my painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some values first. So I'm using Williamsburg Flake White and a little bit of Neo-Megilp to thin out the paint a little bit. So Williamsburg Flake White and Winsor Newton's Raw Umber. So I'm just going to mix up a simple little value scale here. And I'm using a brush cleaner called, let's see what it's called. I keep forgetting. Citrus Essence Brush Cleaner. And again, if you want to know exactly what materials that I'm using, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below, and all of that information will be typed up for you. I do want to have some slight dark lights around the corners just to help transition the light into shade. I mean, that about does it for the little value scale. I don't know, I just feel comfortable having some mixtures on my palette. I don't know, do you feel the same? You like having some puddles of paint already mixed on the palette. Alright, so with a little bit of Neo-Megilp medium, we now have our little consistency here for the drawing color. So it seems like, based on what you're telling me, that I need to elongate the metacarpals, meaning I have this area a little bit too scrunched, and I have the fingers a little bit too wide. So really the best way is to just tackle the problem immediately, as opposed to just trying to run away from it. I mean, mistakes are part of the process. And that's how we learn. So first thing I'm going to do is make these marks here for the fingers, which will basically indicate the problem areas as well. So that's the boundary between the fingers, and that's going to be our wrist. So the distance from the wrist over here to the metacarpal, or sorry, the distance from the wrist here to where the fingers start, where the phalanges start, this distance here. So it appears that we made it too small, and we made the fingers too wide. So let's go ahead and address some of these issues. So what I did before was I pushed the fingers inwards because I thought that the hand was too large. So I don't want to go and recreate what I had before, unless what I had before was okay in the transfer drawing. Who knows? But don't be afraid of these kind of things. I feel like this kind of steers people away from painting. You know, the whole thing about making something, thinking it's correct, coming back, seeing it's wrong. And that shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. It just should be seen as just part of the process. If we're not open about our drawing mistakes, how will we ever progress? So let's go ahead and elongate the fingers back to what I had before, because really that's all I can think of doing right now. So again, I'm pushing the outlines out, and at the same time I'm going to see if I can sit back. Okay, so since the metacarpal area is too small, the only thing really that we can do is either shrink the width of this down or elongate it. So I think we're going to do a little bit of both, and only a little bit of both. So let's go ahead and bring this little corner inwards again. So if that's the back side of the hand, we're going to push, going to get a clean brush, and we're going to push the metacarpals, or sorry, we're going to push the phalanges that way a little bit. So now the new distance for the metacarpals is this. So this is where we were before, or sorry, this is where we are now. This is where we were before. Notice I had a mark right there. Thank goodness I made that mark. So we are moving it out by 6.7 millimeters. So we're elongating it by 6.7 millimeters, and I think we're going to compress it. Let's say by this much. So that's where the old shape was. Now we're moving it inwards. So we moved it inwards by not very much. I don't want to grow the hand. I just want to make the fingers thinner and increase the length for the metacarpal. So let's see, how much did we move? 1.5, 1.5 or 1.6 millimeters pushed inwards. And the reason I'm starting to use numbers for these corrections is just because I know that it's kind of difficult to try to relate from your computer screen or from your smartphone or TV or wherever you're watching this. So that's why I'm giving you those numbers, so you can actually have an idea of the actual size of the hand and the corrections. So here's the pinky. So we're elongating the pinky, elongating the fingers basically. Let's see. And not elongating them by that much. And I think, you know what I'll do is just shrink them a little bit without really measuring it, just kind of by eye. See this? Kind of where we have this, I'm going to try to shrink it by a little bit using the clean brush. So you said finger by finger. So let's start out with this corner here. So that will be the new width. Now this one, we're going to shrink it a little bit. With a clean brush. So what I'm going to be doing is each day, since I'm uploading these videos each day, you can always go ahead and write something down in the comments, anything you'd like to tell me about the painting, or any kind of questions in general. And that's how I will be communicating, as opposed to taking a lot of time out of my day to write. I think it's better if I just talk to you. Another question I saw before was if I prefer to use these MDF panels. Let's see, what does it say? MDF panels over canvas. So this is an MDF panel. Do I prefer to use this over canvas? If it's a regular cotton canvas, yes, I prefer to use this. If it's a linen canvas, no, I still prefer linen. But remember, linen is a little more expensive. A little more. It's a lot more expensive. So in an ideal world for me, I'd be using oil primed linen like all the time. But this does just fine. All right, so now we made the fingers a little bit thinner. And of course, you know, it's not all going to be perfect each time, but if we make a little progress each day, and we're making this progress together, let's think about this as a painting that we're all creating together. I really want to invite you into my studio each and every single day. This can be our studio. And you know, this is the challenge in traditional art or representational art, that a lot of things aren't really that subjective. If the hands are wrong, they're just wrong. I can't say, well, I see it like that, and just let that be my excuse. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit any other way of painting. Everything is valid. Everything's beautiful. It's just that if something's wrong in the drawing or in a traditional style painting, it's just wrong. And does it mean that it's a bad painting, or that that person or whatever shouldn't paint anymore? That's not the case. Don't be afraid of mistakes. I love what Bob Ross always said: we don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents. But in real life, we do make mistakes. It's just we have to be open to them and learn from them. You know, not every mistake in the painting is going to turn into a bird or a mountain. And again, I'm not trying to ridicule Bob Ross. I love Bob Ross. It's just that we have kind of different philosophies in terms of mistakes. So now this hand needs to elongate a little bit. So if it does, I might be in some trouble. So if I'm moving this a little bit further down, so say to there. So again, we're moving it basically 2.2 millimeters down. So if we're elongating it by 2.2 millimeters, and elongate, I mean pull this shape down roughly 2.2 millimeters, you know, that's also going to bring this down with it. So it's going to elongate the finger, this pinky finger, even more. And at this point, you may be wondering, why don't you just trace out the photograph? I could. I certainly could. But that wouldn't be any fun. You know, I really like problem solving. And I think a lot of this involves problem solving. And I hope I'm not boring you too much with me rambling on about my philosophy on making mistakes or how I correct things. I'm just trying to show you the real life stuff, what it really is to struggle with the drawing of a hand, but to struggle in such a way that you'll learn from it. You know, in the gym, I'm sure some people really like pushing themselves really, really hard, you know, that saying no pain, no gain. And this is kind of how it is. It's like being in the gym or pushing ourselves even harder. So that's definitely elongating the hand, or sorry, the fingers. So now what we'll do is we'll start to put in some values, and we're going to start off with the dark halftones. Now I didn't really want to get into values, but I think that I'm going to have to use a different tool to help me see with a little more clarity. And that tool is going to be value. So this is just a halftone here that I'm going to be applying for each finger, because the fingers are angling away from the light. And sometimes it's just really hard to see corrections that need to be made with just outlines. Even with light and shadow, sometimes it can be very difficult. But all of a sudden, we kind of see a little differently when it comes time to put in value. So that's why I'm starting to actually use value onto the hands. So we're switching modes from just a simple light and dark outlines to introducing at least 3 values. Value changes there for the knuckles. And you know, when this hand works out, when this hand becomes realistic and looks visually compelling, and I mean that in a good way, we would have done this together. Don't be afraid to point things out. Don't be afraid to talk to me in the comments. So now we're putting in these darker halftones as the knuckles turn around towards the fingers. And I'm just going to be focusing on the right hand, or sorry, the left hand right now. So all of this is getting darker a little bit, but there's a little bit of a plane change here. See that? How it's getting a little darker here. And you know, sometimes we just can't see things until we add value into it. So see how there's going to be a little bit of a value change there as the pinky, this little shape of the pinky starts to turn away. Just the dark of the knuckle, pushing out a little further. All right, so now we're going to start to build some of the lights. Let's start with this one. A little bit of light for the knuckle. It's also creating a plane change on the hand. So this is actually turning into the structure of the hand a little bit, isn't it? So you know what? I think that this outline, we're going to push it in. See that? So we're going to push it in just a little bit. And how much did we push that shape in? Oops, gotta turn this thing on. Pushed it in by 1.3 millimeters. Very, very tiny. So now we're starting to add a little bit more light to the knuckles. And you know, I don't know that much about the anatomy. I know that these are called metacarpals, and I know that these are phalanges. And you know, funny story how I know that these are called phalanges? I used to watch this TV show called Bones. It was like one of my favorite TV shows on Netflix. And Temperance Brennan, I think that was her name, would always point out like phalanges, phalanges. She would always use that word. She was a forensic anthropologist in that TV show. So that's how the term phalanges kind of stuck with me. And there's even a little bit of a light right over here. Now I know we're getting a little beyond the simple light and dark arrangement. I think that transitioning into this way of looking at the structure with the planes and all of this is going to help see the shapes. A little bit more light up here. We're literally painting the plane, each individual little plane now for the metacarpals. And hopefully we'll get the metacarpals right this time. And if we don't, it's not the end of the world. We're going to come back in with color, or even with another layer for the underpainting. And we'll figure it out. And I tend to think of drawing as like basically all that is good and all that is evil in painting is drawing. So we gotta get the drawing as accurate as we possibly can. And yes, I know that she has her ring there, but I'm just going to ignore it for now. I'll put it in later, promise. So it's getting a little darker here now as the hand, this portion of the hand starts to turn away from the light. And now we're approaching all of these complicated bones that create the wrist. But for me right now, all it's going to be is just a change in value. In a little dark shape over here. I'm going to use the fan brush to help eliminate some glare. A little bit darker here. And then I'm starting to notice that the planes over here could be a little darker now. Now we're starting to push the darks. So now we're pushing the differentiation between the planes for the knuckles even further. So after putting a few values in here for the hand, I think that it's a little better in terms of the length of the metacarpals and the thickness of the individual fingers. At least let's hope. So what I'm noticing is that in my block-in, I had a very kind of sharp angle here, whereas what it is a little more of a subtle curve. So I'm going to leave that point where it is. I think it's all right. So I'm thinking that this point is all right. So it's a little more of a graceful curve. Now let's think of a curve as a series of straight lines. So here's one predominant straight line that we had, and then right about here it started to shift down. And I think that the model's right hand, see, this is the advantage of working from life as opposed to photograph, is sometimes you don't know exactly what's going on in the photograph. I think the model's right hand is actually kind of like making a slight fist, where the model's left hand, of course it's making a fist, but it's not as, so the model's left hand is somewhat like less of a fist, whereas the right hand is almost completely like a fist, it looks like to me. So that being said, I think that, I don't know, but I think that this shape here needs to go up again, I think. But rather than make that change right away, I'm going to just go ahead and put in the value that I need there for the skin tone. And I think when we get into color, or if we put another layer of monochrome on the hand, it'll probably be a little more clear whether or not to push that shape up. So again, I just thin out the paint with my medium, the Neo-Megilp. Now it's not, like I said before, like I said yesterday, it's not really recommended to use mediums, a lot of medium right away. It's recommended to increase your medium with the number of layers that you apply on the painting, but for this instance, for this painting, I think we'll be all right. What I want is for the painting to be dry. I want the painting to dry pretty much overnight so that I can continue to work on it. That's also why I'm using flake white instead of titanium, just because it dries faster. You can really see how much we pushed the hand, how much we shrank the this width here, because this line here is where it used to be, so it shrank even more, hopefully for the better. So this, shrinking this down should have made the metacarpals appear a little longer. So we shrank it by about 5.3 millimeters, so pretty significant. And the same applies for the fingers. We shrank them about that much. And so with a clean and dry synthetic brush, the last thing I'm going to do is just soften this little edge here. Just with a few light touches. And then I'll go over it once again with my fan brush, just to eliminate some glare. And with that, I think that's going to be about it for the underpainting of the hand. So I think we'll title this video something along the lines of painting a realistic hand in monochrome. But also, it was another kind of another problem solving or mistakes video. And let's think of a drawing as a series of corrections. And I think that's one of the most fun things about traditional or classical, whatever you want to call it, about realistic oil painting is that there's a lot of problem solving involved in it, and there's a lot of pushing and pulling, but there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction that you get out of the learning process and seeing that certain things need to be changed one way or the other, and then after a certain number of hours, you see what you had envisioned in your mind come into fruition onto the canvas or whichever surface that you're working on. So I hope that this helps you out. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you again tomorrow.